is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Good evening. I'm Victor the Voice Furman, and welcome to Destination Unlimited. Many practical and spiritual practices advocate space clearing, letting go of the accumulated and often forgotten material things that clutter our homes, basements, garages, and may even extend to external storage sites and sometimes multiple storage sites. But what about the clutter that fills our mind? The old memories, hurts, the should-haves and could-haves that block and inhibit us from being fully present. Our guest this week, Donald Altman, addresses this in his new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, Mindfulness Practices for Letting Go of What's Blocking Your Fulfillment and Transformation. Donald calls mindfulness his passion and has written several books on the practice, including One-Minute Mindfulness, the Mindfulness Code, the Joy Compass, and several others on mindful eating. Donald is a practicing psychotherapist and a former Buddhist monk. He teaches in the Neurobiology program at Portland State University, and you can find so much more about him online at mindfulpractices.com. Please join me in welcoming Donald Altman. Good evening, Donald.
Oh, good evening, Victor. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. Now, you're an author, a teacher, a psychotherapist, but you were also ordained as a monk in the Burmese Buddhist monastery. Let's talk about that experience in your life. How did that come about?
Well, I do have to say it was an amazing experience that turned my life, transformed and turned it in a very different direction. I went into the monastery basically when I had met a monk, a Burmese monk by the name of U Thilananda, the Venerable U Thilananda, a well-known teaching monk from Burma. And he had come to this country in the 70s. And when I met him, I was just overwhelmed by the sense of compassion and availability that he had. I'd never really met anybody quite like that. And during a difficult time in my life, I found out that I could ordain with him as the head of the monastery. And so I was very much interested in learning how did he become the kind of person he was.
Now, were there specific mindfulness teachings that you studied with him?
Well, yes. He had written a book called The Four Foundations of Mindfulness, which I believe is still in publication. So he was a very traditional Burmese Buddhist monk in the Theravada tradition. For example, mindful eating was something that he didn't specifically talk about, but that was an interest of mine, and I had been a mindless eater, and one of the reasons I was hoping the monastery experience might help me was to help, of course, deepen my spiritual life, but also I really questioned whether or not I'd be able to eat mindfully in the monastery. But one of the monks one day asked me to sit across from him, and I was a little bit nervous about that, but it was just the best experience of just watching and being present and experiencing people eat food in a very present way. Of course, we practiced noble silence in the monastery, which meant you didn't speak unless you absolutely had to. And so the meals were silent, but everybody was so attentive to one another. They were so present. And it spoke volumes, much more than if I had read something about it, actually. So just being around the monks was a wonderful mindfulness teaching in itself. I mean, he did talk about mindfulness, but one of his favorite teachings was the loving kindness meditation, and that's how I gathered that he'd become this very compassionate, caring individual.
How does one become a former monk? Did you decide to renounce your vows, or what was that all about?
Well, yeah, it's really fascinating. In that particular tradition, and been able to do retreats in Benedictine monasteries and other monasteries, and every tradition has a different way of working with vows. In that Theravada Buddhist tradition, you don't go in saying that you're going to be there for a particular length of time. It's a day-by-day proposition. You go in and you're there today, and you're there the next day, and you're there the next day. Now, when I went in, I told the monks, I let the monks know that I was going to be there for a period of time, that I always had felt that my work was going to be out here in the world, but I think I was very right for the experience. And so it had a tremendous, profound impact on me, and it changed my life in the direction of the kind of work I was doing even. I went back to graduate school after I got out of the monastery and trained to be a psychotherapist and worked in the mindful eating field for a while. I actually worked in an intensive outpatient clinic for 4 years, an eating disorder clinic. And what I found is able to continue to apply these ideas of mindfulness to people who are suffering and see that it was able to make a difference. And so that's why it's been a passion of mine, and trying to bring these tools to people in a number of different ways, not just therapeutically in terms of mental health issues, but also helping people just free themselves from attachment to the emotional clutter that often clouds our minds and makes life, difficult.
Now, many people know you through your classic mindful eating book, The Art of the Inner Meal, and the spiritual eating workshops that you used to lead. What drew you to mindfulness in eating and food?
I had been an emotional eater most of my life, and I had struggled with that. And I really began to question whether or not I could find a way to moderate my eating or eat in a more, change my relationship to food and to the meal that was in front of me. So I found that actually it was possible to change your relationship to how you eat, change your relationship to old habits, old conditioning, old thoughts, and even change your relationship to what painful experiences that happened to you in your family. But food was kind of the doorway through which I entered into mindfulness, and it's a wonderful path, actually. I think that mindful eating is very much like the master's program in mindfulness, because we can have so many ingrained and entrenched habits when it comes to food and eating that it really can be very challenging work. And if you can work with that, you can pretty much work with mindfulness in any area of your life.
Now, you mentioned that in conducting these workshops, many people were coming to you about eating disorders that they were struggling with, and that really led you to becoming a licensed psychotherapist. Do you find that your work in that regard is a marriage of mindfulness, psychology, and neuroscience?
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. It's an interesting time to be in the psychology field, because mindfulness is really becoming a very big part of therapy nowadays. And also, we're also at the same time, we're learning about brain science and how mindfulness changes the brain. So there really is a nice confluence of psychotherapy, cognitive therapy, which has been around for a long time, but what looks at, of course, how are you using your thoughts? So that's a very big part of mindfulness. So it's a really exciting time to be in the field, or just to be involved in mindfulness, when we are learning that you actually can rewire your thoughts. And this was considered to be impossible not too many years ago, that, for example, that where you place your attention and the thoughts you have actually restructure your synaptic connections and change the architecture of your inner brain. And it also alters how you think. Has been shown to alter hundreds of biological processes in the body, and even been shown that anxious thoughts or depressive negative thinking can even shorten key important part of our chromosome called the telomere that is implicated in aging, kind of a biological marker of aging. So that we're beginning to understand all this. I mean, mystics and people just intuitively knew how beneficial mindfulness was, and they could experience the positive effects in somebody's life. But now we're beginning to understand how it can affect us deep, deep down into our biological well-being.
So the practice of mindfulness, I would assume including meditation and other mindful practices, actually produces pharmacopoeia in the brain that makes us physically healthier.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You're regulating the brain, and what you're doing is you're constructively distancing from thoughts that can have a negative effect or trigger your stress system. And the stress system gets triggered. Of course, we're flooded with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. And so it's just fascinating to see how mindfulness actually can help us be healthier And mindfulness, as I talk about it in my new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, is also very much a way in which we connect with others. Mindfulness is not just, many people have thought of it, well, it's just my own inner experiences, my thoughts, what I'm feeling in the body, everything that my senses are telling me, but it's very much how we co-share, co-create this experience with others. And I've come through my years now of working with mindfulness and teaching all around the country and even in Europe, I've come to expand my understanding or very deepen my understanding of mindfulness as a way that we can purposely partner up with others. That mindfulness is important to helping us help one another achieve our dreams and our purpose in life.
And we'll be back with more with Donald Altman, his new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, after these brief messages.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Me, a cat, moving in with a new human. It took a little getting used to. She has these weird games she likes to play, like this giant feather. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. It's almost like she thinks I enjoy it. But seeing how much fun she gets out of it, well, I guess it makes it all worth it. Humans.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
The National Institute of Mental Health reports that 1 in 4 adults will experience a mental health disorder in a given year. I'm Marjorie McGinn, President and Executive Director of Women in Government. Talk to your healthcare provider because serious mental illness can be treated. Between 70 and 90% of individuals see significant symptom relief and improved quality of life. To learn more, please visit womeningovernment.org.
Join Elliot Jolish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolish Hour as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolish Hour.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
And we're back with our guest, Donald Altman, author of the new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter. Donald, how is emotional clutter different from, say, mental clutter, where your mind is just filled with to-do lists and things that you have to do in everyday tasks?
There's a similarity there. Mental clutter is a lot like what I call emotional clutter. And anything that really fills your mind up and takes you away from being able to experience this moment, or else fills you up with a lot of negativity, or as you obsessed or focusing on thoughts that really make it harder for you to function effectively. I think what can happen is when if you've ever seen the TV show Hoarders, you know how hard it is for those people to really function. Their whole apartment is filled up with stuff. And two, clutter in our mind can make it more difficult for us to have some clarity and calm, and we're not able to, for example, to recognize the good things that are around us, let alone our own inner strengths.
Is there a parallel between material hoarding and emotional hoarding?
I think there is. There may be some other psychological, more obsessive compulsive things happening with somebody who is doing physical hoarding, and actually, I think that anxiety may kind of fall on a continuum of a kind of obsessive way of thinking about things. And what we've learned is that even in the field of obsessive compulsive disorder, for example, Victor, is that people can actually, there was developed by a guy named Jeffrey Schwartz, a 4-part mindfulness practice for rewiring the brain around those that faulty OCD circuit in the brain. So I think there is some relationship there between physical clutter and emotional clutter. Of course, the results are similar in that it can be isolating. It can make our lives very difficult.
So how would you actually define emotional clutter?
I would say that emotional clutter is anything that dysregulates you or takes you out of a sense of being centered in harmony and having a sense of harmony. And that might mean that you're in a state of dis-ease or anxiousness, or you're focused on the past, or you're worried about the future. And that would be any kind of that would be emotional clutter. Also, not being able to really notice the little things that are all around you. Like somebody I worked with one time who happened to be in Hawaii on vacation. And when he came back, he said, I was going to call you from Hawaii because I was sitting on this beautiful sand beach, and yet I could not enjoy it. He said all I could do was think about all these, have these anxious thoughts about things that I had to do in the future. So I would say that would be a good description of clutter, anything that's causing us to get dysregulated.
So you would say that emotional clutter is the same as emotional baggage?
I would say that that's a good equivalent way of thinking about it, yeah.
Now, we know that when people do emotional eating and other emotional habits, that it's a way of trying to cover up perhaps pains of past traumas and bad experiences. Is emotional clutter also a way of trying to shut away and hide the old pains and traumas or cover them up?
Oh, it could be. Yeah, absolutely. So, and many times I think what we might seek out pleasure, for example, as a distraction to take us away from reflecting more deeply. In fact, I think that with all the technology that we have and all the ways that our attention is being fractured nowadays with multitasking, that we're losing the ability to reflect inwardly, and that's very critical to mindfulness. In fact, human beings, that's what makes us special, is that we have that ability to focus inward, and more so than other mammals. And it's because of this area right behind the forehead, right behind the eyebrow ridge, actually, is an area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And that is very much what allows us to experience mindfulness and to look inward and reflect. And I think that losing that is a great loss, because it also means that we're going to lose our ability to connect with others, develop empathy, and really bring a lot of deeper richness into our life and think about even our ethics and our values. That part of the brain allows us to think about what matters most to us. And imagine what a loss that would be if we stopped looking inward.
Absolutely. So is that something that's been demonstrated with MRIs or scans of the brain, that people who are practicing mindfulness, that area of the brain sort of lights up, as they say?
Absolutely. We have seen that part of the brain does light up. And what is more, it actually can send inhibiting signals down to the part of the brain that triggers stress. It's called the amygdala, deep in the emotional core of the brain. So it actually helps regulate and quiet down that reactive part of the brain that we need for survival purposes, but often it's turned on all the time, and we don't need the default setting to be too high, right? It might be too sensitized, and we need to be able to look inwardly and say, hey, there's nothing really here that is a danger to me.
So it's really true, as you think, is the truth behind the way the brain functions.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think many of us, I say if you think something long enough, you're going to probably believe it.
Absolutely. Now, how can the toxic patterns of emotional clutter keep you from fulfilling the life of your dreams?
Well, I think it's important to think about what our dreams are and reflect on that. And clutter can definitely pull us away from that. It can keep us, it can really hinder us and hinder our progress, I think. When you think about, we're all going to have challenges in life, and nobody manages to avoid that in one way or another. We don't really know what life is going to hand us, and we don't have control over that. What we can do is we can decide how we want to respond, even to those very challenging parts of life. And it is through being skillful in knowing how to respond that we can shape a fulfilling life, even with challenges and difficulties. And I've seen it time and again. There was a gentleman who another therapist was telling me about, who was an alcoholic at one time in his life, and he had a car accident in which he was crippled, and he was very bitter. And he years later he says that accident was the best thing that ever happened to him. Even though he's wheelchair bound, he said it changed his life, and it forced him to look at himself. So how we respond to the challenges is really what matters, isn't it?
Absolutely. Such a traumatic event having that effect on his life and making him turn inward and becoming mindful. But in your book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, you talk about that in a few minutes of exercise, of daily exercise of mindfulness, you can actually start changing these patterns in your mind. How can that happen in such a short amount of time?
Well, it's very much like going to the gym, and you can work out a little bit every day. Day to day, you might not notice any difference, but at the end of a couple of months, you start to see the differences. And that's what we're learning, even through brain science. Even just a few minutes of paying attention in a different way can actually rewire and change some of these circuits in the brain. So the amazing thing is it doesn't take a whole lot of time. I think even 3 to 5 minutes a day start to increase your ability to make new decisions. Because what you're doing here is, think about it, you're thinking differently to begin with. Let's take the idea that we have 75,000 thoughts in the course of a day, which scientists have said we have at least a minimum number of that many thoughts.
I think that's a little shortfall there.
Well, the Buddha thought we could have 3,000 thoughts per second, so that would really up the number.
That sounds more like it.
Yeah, and so I want your audience just to think for a moment. How many of those 75,000 thoughts, or how many you think you have, tell you something really profound about yourself? How many of those thoughts are accurate thoughts, right? But how many of them really are probably based in old conditioned patterns, maybe automatic thoughts that just arise, or reactive thoughts that don't really tell you a lot about who you really are?
Yeah.
And so one place to start is just to start by gaining awareness of where your mind goes. Where does it wander off to? What are those thoughts? And I have a chapter in the book, actually, I call Inner Facebooking, that helps people start to notice that, just like you put up a Facebook post, or when you're watching somebody else's post, that can have an effect on you. Your inner thought posts can also, you can call it an inner selfie if you want, but your inner selfies can have a tremendous impact on you. And so I want people to start just starting to notice those in a very, kind, gentle way. Like, oh, hello again, old friend. Here's this thought or that thought.
And fascinated by your concept of inner Facebooking. And, people posting the negative images, the negative selfies, and so on and so forth. How about the positive selfies? Are those something they can employ?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's really important is that we do put up positive selfies, not to aggrandize our ego, or not as a way of being phony, but as a way of really assessing who we really are. I mean, everybody has strengths, and it's part of our story. It's part of what makes us effective in the world. And so we need to give that fair play also, right? Instead of just having the negative channel. It's like changing the History Channel and putting on something new, putting on something a little fresh, and that can be supportive. Our own thoughts can have a tremendous impact on us. We know, for example, that verbal abuse, pure verbal abuse or parental verbal abuse actually damages certain parts of the brain, and we know that that can be as bad even as sexual or physical abuse now.
Our topic is mindfulness. Our guest is Donald Altman, the author of the new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter. Donald, please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and your book.
Well, thank you, Victor. Yeah, you can find out about it at mindfulpractices.com. That's my website. I have a newsletter there, and I invite everybody to sign up. There's a new mindfulness reflection every month and some new mindfulness tools that you can put into play immediately. Also, you can get the book at Clearing Emotional Clutter at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
And we'll be back with more of Donald's book on Destination Unlimited after these messages.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
Every 2 minutes, an American is sexually assaulted. The majority of victims know their attacker. It could be your friend, your neighbor, or someone you met at a party. If you said no, it's rape, and it's a crime. This is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Call the National Sexual Assault Hotline today at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit RAIN.org. That's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive, dedicated community.
People are always looking to invest in a good opportunity. So what if you could invest in the future of kids, like a stock? Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change called Better Futures. With your investment, it helps students like me go to college. My name is Charles, and I'm your dividend.
Invest in better futures with UNCF. Visit uncf.org/invest. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. Our guest this evening is Donald Altman, author of the book Clearing Emotional Clutter, talking about mindfulness. Let's talk about some of the other concepts in the book. First of all, you mentioned riding the emotional elevator. If we get stuck there in old pains and insults and traumas and toxic stressors and baggage from the past and present, how do we decide to push the open button and get off the elevator?
Well, there really is an elevator, first of all, and that elevator goes up and down every time we get positive comment from somebody, or you get that job you wanted, whatever it is. That elevator can go up, or maybe you tell yourself, I really did a great job here today, or that elevator can go down when maybe things don't work as you planned. I mean, as a speaker, and I travel around the country, I might have a really good talk, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm just waiting until Oprah calls me, right? Or it doesn't go so well. Or maybe I hear a negative comment, and then I'm thinking, oh, my career is toast now, right? And so that's that elevator going up and down. What happens is we can start chasing the up button and avoiding that down button. And then we can fall into habitual patterns. And so the elevator really does go up and down. And how to break free from the elevator is to get a little space from that constant committee of the I, the me, the mine, and the mind that is trying to commandeer our lives. And to see that between, if we could quiet that, there's just a spaciousness to our consciousness, just an open spaciousness, almost an infinite awareness. When you're, and I like to just tell people, if you don't know if you've experienced that, think about a time you saw something that was very beautiful. Maybe it was a sunset, or looking up at the stars, or seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time. And in those moments, you kind of forgot about yourself, and you almost merged with what you were experiencing. And that's that kind of, you could think of it as, choiceless awareness, or when the observer and the observed almost merge. And so there's, in that moment, there's just awareness, like bare awareness. And it's beautiful to do that. And so I do have a meditation to help people develop that kind of awareness in the book.
It's funny, you're talking about the elevator, and I remember, I'm going to date myself, and you probably, I think you and I might be contemporaries, but there was a song by Donovan in the 60s called Epistle to Dippy, and there was a line about, through the levels you've been changing, elevator in the brain hotel, broken down but just as well. Looking through all kinds of windows, I can see I've had your fun. I just remember, you remember that song?
Yeah. We were contemporaries on that.
We are contemporaries on that. So, the elevator in the brain hotel, so it's there. So just make sure that you don't get stuck in the riding up and down, up and down, up and down. Pause, push the button, and step out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that meditation, are you talking about cultivating a beautiful garden of thought, that meditation?
Well, that's a little bit different meditation. That's a different meditation. That's a meditation where you're actually becoming more aware of the thoughts you have, and putting up positive thoughts, kind of positive selfies, right? But just being aware of what your thoughts are. Are you having a lot of weeds in your garden, right? Are you having the kind of awareness of mind and positivity that you want? So we can kind of cultivate that. And again, that's awareness practice. So even our thoughts, it's not the idea here that you have to eliminate your thoughts. Thoughts are awareness in this moment. Just as when I touch my palm, if you touch your palm with your finger, that's a physical sensation. So you can think of your thoughts almost as mental sensations, and we can be present with them in the moment too. But we also can know that our mind can affect us dramatically. One example of that is the Navy SEALs. So the Navy SEALs, when they get new recruits, they put them through a lot of difficult training. They're purposely trying to trigger the stress response, trigger fear and anxiety. They want to see how they're going to respond. And the problem was they were having a lot of failures. And they were losing a lot of good recruits, actually. So they thought, how could we help our recruits succeed? And so one of the ways they would do that would be to, they realized, was positive self-talk. In other words, create that can-do kind of thinking that can help you get through even the challenging times. Another thing that the Marines do is kind of interesting. You think of how even the Marines now are learning mindfulness, but they have a thing called embrace the suck. Now, that sometimes they're in horrible conditions and they have to just be present with it.
Yeah.
Right? Mindfulness is not about escaping or avoiding the difficult things. It's about being present with it, but also knowing that we can be supportive of ourselves and supportive of others.
Now, family emotional clutter is probably a very difficult thing for people to deal with, to untangle themselves from the emotional clutter where family is concerned. How do you recommend that people handle this?
Family clutter is a major problem. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't been touched by it. And I often like to ask the people in my audiences, has anybody out here, does anybody here have a difficult person in your life? And I don't know anybody yet that hasn't raised their hand to that question. So, and often it's somebody in our own family. So I see this as an opportunity to grow and to recognize that even this most difficult person has a lot to teach us. And I'm not suggesting that some people aren't ready to forgive, and I understand that. But what I am suggesting is that we can start to open up to even those difficult persons and understand that everybody has suffered, right? And those people in our family who might be difficult to us, or they've had a lot of pain, suffering in their lives. And so nobody escapes that. I don't know anybody with a human body and a human mind who's escaped loss, aging, or suffering of some kind. So we can develop a sense of compassion and kindness. The word compassion, if you break it down, means to be with suffering. Mm-hmm. How can we recognize that every human being has suffered in some way, and we could develop what I like to think of as, I call a compassionate presence, a way of connecting at that level. We don't have to say it, but we know it. So you're with somebody, and their suffering might be spilling over onto you, and it could be when you're out shopping, it could be at the workplace. And I'm not saying that we don't have to respond or do anything about that, but that first we can recognize the suffering and understand that that often causes a lot of additional suffering for ourselves and how we respond to that. But if we can accept it and understand it more, that can help liberate us in the moment.
Is forgiveness part of the mindfulness path?
I think that forgiveness is part of that path, and I know that forgiveness can be difficult for a lot of people, but I think that forgiveness is really a gift that only the person who has been injured can offer to give to another. And I like people to think about how they might be willing to give that gift. And they never have to even say it. I mean, you could give the gift without telling that person. That person may no longer be alive. You could still give that gift. But I think what it does is it takes the person who has been hurt or injured or abused. It lets you out of a prison of anger and bitterness, because that's what happens when we are treated badly by another, and we're held in the grip of that anger when we won't forgive. Forgiveness kind of unlocks the door of our own jail cell, I think, and it allows us to get out.
Yeah, there's an old famous expression about forgiveness, about anger and hatred. It says hatred is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah, I've heard that. That is very true.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in this world that is filled with distractions. We have distractions at work, distractions at home, distractions in the media. What are your tips for changing the distraction channel, and why is it so important?
Well, the distraction channel is getting more and more filled up in our lives. And so there are fewer spaces for us to find that quiet time. And why it's important for us to do that is that those distractions are also altering our brains and our minds and not allowing us to really appreciate what's before us. So I suggest that instead of multitasking, what about unitasking or solo tasking, whatever you want to call it, and allowing yourself to really slow down and appreciate what you're doing with 100% commitment to it. So if you're walking, commit yourself 100% to walking. If you're sitting, could you commit yourself 100% to the act of sitting? Your body knows how to do that, right?
Absolutely.
I call it natural body. It's natural sitting. And just sit to sit, right?
Absolutely.
Come into the body. A lot of people think that the mind is the primary organ. And I think it was Joseph Campbell once who said that if the mind becomes the primary organ, you get people like Darth Vader. What we do, we need to get embodied. We need to experience getting out of the head and getting into this wonderful, precious gift that carries our consciousness around and can allow us to slow down.
How important are breathing exercises for that?
Oh, breathing is very important. And I think that if breathing is a wonderful way to regulate yourself, but just to come back, when you think about a breath, let's everybody take a breath right now, a nice in-breath, filling up the belly, and then exhaling slowly. Nice that is. So was that yesterday or was that tomorrow, that breath?
That was now.
That was very much now. And so that's the wonderful thing about breathing is we can only really experience it here and now. And I think that that just by being aware of just a handful of breaths every day, it'd be wonderful. I mean, everybody takes between 18 to 20,000 breaths in the course of a day. But what would it be like just to spend maybe a minute in the morning, a minute in the afternoon, and a minute in the evening just sitting with your breath?
Delightful. Our guest is Donald Altman. His book is called Clearing Emotional Clutter. We'll be back with more of his book and more of his techniques after these messages.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Are you in an interfaith relationship and thinking of getting married? For 18 years, Reverend Lori Sue Brockway has been creating personalized, loving, and romantic ceremonies for couples of all faiths and cultural backgrounds. Reverend Lori Sue's sensitivity to the needs of interfaith couples is reflected in the compassionate and inclusive way she addresses the concerns of parents and families. Reverend Lori Sue is also the author of several best-selling books on interfaith weddings and wedding vows. Selected as one of the top interfaith officiants by New York Magazine, Reverend Lori Sue serves couples in the New York metropolitan area and beyond. Find out more at her website, yourinterfaithwedding.com.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness and action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
And we're back with Destination Unlimited. Our guest tonight is Donald Altman, the author of Clearing Emotional Clutter, Mindfulness Practices for Letting Go of What's Blocking Your Fulfillment and Transformation. Donald, you have a great chapter on vaccinating yourself against affluenza. First, please describe what affluenza is.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. Affluenza is thought of really as a social disease. And it has to do with wanting more and more. And actually, I can give you the actual definition as it was in the book Affluenza. A painful, contagious, socially transmitted condition of overload, debt, anxiety, and waste resulting from the dogged pursuit of more.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that can describe several people who are currently in the political scene right now, I would think, right?
That's a very astute observation. Very true.
So now, how does that impact us, and how can that add to emotional clutter?
It's really about grasping and after more and never being satisfied with what you have. There's this idea of the hungry ghost in the Tibetan Buddhist practice, and the hungry ghost is pictured as a being with a giant mouth, a giant belly, but a very skinny throat. In other words, its hunger is great, but it can never be satiated. It can never get enough. And so this has a lot of negative consequences in our lives. So if you're constantly grasping and always getting tired of what you have, and you need that next new thing and that next new thing, and it might be the next new person, next new relationship, the next new car. And I'm not saying that there aren't certain things that we need, but this is beyond need. It's just a series of just wanting that is craving. And so it's craving that can never be fulfilled. And I've worked with people, and I've seen people who don't know how to moderate or put on the brakes, who are overspending, and finally they crash, and it's sad. I've had people who actually everything they had was eventually taken away from them, and they had to relearn how to live and who they were. Because sometimes we buy into the idea that we are this new thing that we have in our life. I don't know, on this car, on this, right? We measure ourselves by the objects around us. Even think of the term trophy wife, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, and so this is really an affliction, and it's important to break free from that.
The idea of finding your strengths is a major thread through your book. Can you expand on that a little, and why are strengths so important?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that, because strengths are very important. Strengths are how we can be effective throughout our day and in the world. And a lot of people actually diminish or devalue their own strengths. And sometimes so strengths are very important, because strengths are how we are effective in the world. And it's easy to diminish your strengths. Now, think about a time, for example, if somebody ever gave you a compliment and you had a difficult time letting that in or seeing the validity in that. That's just an example of how often I think sometimes we're kind of taught not to blare out what is good about us. And that's not what I'm suggesting here. I'm not talking about bragging, but about really giving yourself credit where credit is due, because it can be helpful for us to notice our strengths. There's a wonderful little strengths exercise that I have in the Clearing Emotional Clutter book. It's very simple. It's about naming 3 of your strengths. So just pick 3, and every week choose one of those strengths and put it into practical application. Apply it somehow one time a day for an entire week. The second week, use the second strength. Third week, use the third strength. The idea here is that suppose that your strength is that you show hospitality to others, or you're kind to others. So maybe one day you do something kind for your spouse, or a partner, you ask to help them, or you're hospitable to them. Maybe at work you ask somebody nearby if they would like you to get them a cup of water or something. So you could do one little hospitable thing every day for a week. And actually, research shows that this reduces symptoms of depression. But why would that be? Why would one little strength do that? Because the thing is that we're actually connecting with others, and we're feeling that we're competent, we're accomplishing something, and it doesn't matter that it's a little thing. I think even the little things do matter, actually. So our strengths are just indicators that we're doing something positive.
Now, how many different strengths are there?
Oh, there are easily over 100 different strengths. So, and that's the cool thing. Even if you go out and you go to a mall, and let's say you go outside and you want to find your car, that's a strength of memory.
At my age, it certainly is.
So and there's self-knowing awareness. There's the ability to laugh. There's compassion. There's as I said, hospitality. There's just so many. There's courage. There's bravery. So the list goes on, and so you might actually think about things that people have said to you. The ability to be a good listener or to express yourself. Those are all strengths. Things you might take for granted. Walking your dog in the morning is a strength of caring for another. If you've ever had a problem, you're able to find somebody to back you up at work. It's a strength of finding resources. I think it's so easy to not see those things or to think, well, that's just what I do on a normal daily basis. But by finding our strengths, and also I think the other thing I'd like to mention is notice the strengths in other people and compliment them on their strengths. Yep. And it will be and look and see what happens to the relationship when you recognize a strength of another, even a stranger. I think it's important to notice that in other people, and it's a beautiful way to connect.
It's interesting. They say that when we mirror for each other, we either can push each other's buttons or find the buttons that about someone else that push us, and or find something that we find delightful in the other and find something that is delightful to us.
There's a lot to attuning with another person can be very powerful. And I actually talk about getting a new brain download, finding somebody who is a positive person and somebody who may be a benefactor in your life, who's shared positive things, and allow yourself to attune to that person. And you actually can get a new brain download. So mirroring is a very, very powerful way of maybe getting what we didn't get when we were young, right?
Right. Now, you talk about developing friendships as a way to clear emotional clutter, and you refer to the 3 seeds of friendship. What are those?
The 3 seeds of friendship, first is acceptance, very important. Accepting your friend just for who they are, not trying to change them, but also having compassion for your friends, very important. Empathy is another one of the seeds of friendship. Recognizing, being able to forgive your friend, being able to enter their emotional world. And then trust. I think trust is probably one of the first seeds of friendship where it takes time to build that trust. When you think about any friendship you have, it's hard to get past not having trust. That can destroy a friendship. So those are the 3 seeds that I talk about, and it's important to cultivate those.
And one of the most important things in real friendship and compassionate friendship is the ability to listen, to really listen and give someone space to share their experience and their path with you. And you say that listening is really an important tool to remove clutter, and you have an acronym that you say is HEAR, H-E-A-R. Please tell us about that acronym.
Yeah, this is kind of neat. It's acronym here. H means, and by the way, the context for this can be maybe you're having a difficult discussion with somebody, or maybe you're feeling threatened, and so you can use this acronym in the moment. So H is for hold your assumptions. So enter into a place of openness. Just set your ideas or beliefs on the side for just a few moments, even 3 minutes, and take an attitude of curiosity. So just letting go of your assumptions for a moment. Empty your cup so you can fill it up and listen to what another person is saying. The second one is the E stands for entering another person's emotional world. I talked about attuning or feeling empathy for another, but so this is really about allowing yourself to experience what is this other person feeling here, and you might by entering their emotional world and having empathy for them, get another perspective on just how important this is for this other person. Do you have a thought on that?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And then A, absorb and accept. So just like, become a sponge. Sponges absorb water. They don't slosh it around. And so you want to become a sponge. You want to really let in what you're hearing. You do it with a sense of acceptance. So you might not agree with what this other person is saying, but you could accept that this is where they're at. This is what their perspective has led them to think. So you're kind of surrendering to another person's point of view. And then the last part here, so here are the first three, the H, E, and the R, are really about all listening and taking it in. The R is then how can I respond? And so that means reflect, then respect. So you may not be able to respond in that moment. Maybe you need time to think about it, and that's okay. And I think it's important to let someone know that you may not be ready to respond right now. So this is the ability to go back, think about it, maybe even talk to somebody about what you've heard. And then it's always important that when you're ready to respond, to do so in a very respectful, kind way, without anger and without reactivity.
And Donald, it was wonderful to hear from you tonight. Your book is called Clearing Emotional Clutter. Please tell our listeners where they can get that book and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Oh, well, thank you, Victor. So the book is Clearing Emotional Clutter. You can go to my website, mindfulpractices.com, MINDFUL practices.com, and sign up for my Mindful Living newsletter. And I have new mindfulness reflections and tips for bringing mindfulness tools into your life. And you can also see an update on where I'm appearing around the country. And hopefully you can come to one of my seminars. And then also the book, you can get this book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, on Amazon.com, at Barnes & Noble stores, on the Barnes & Noble website. So I invite you to use this book to really transform and remove the clutter that might be blocking your life.
Our gratitude to Donald Altman for joining us tonight. This is Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman, and we'll be back again next week. Thanks, everyone, and have a great night.